What if every drop of fresh water on Earth turned to salt overnight? The faucet runs. A woman in Mumbai leans forward, fills her glass, and brings it to her lips. The taste hits her tongue like a punch, sharp, bitter, unmistakably oceanic. She spits into the sink, confusion flooding her face. Across the hallway, her neighbor does the same, then another. Within minutes, the entire apartment complex erupts into frantic voices, doors slamming, phones ringing off their hooks. In Sao Paulo, a father turns on the shower for his daughter. She screams as the spray touches her skin, not from heat, but from the sting of brine. In London, a barista watches his espresso machine sputter and hiss, white mineral deposits already forming on the heating elements. In rural Kenya, a farmer kneels beside his irrigation channel, scoops water with trembling hands, and tastes the impossible. Salt, pure, undeniable salt. By dawn, the realization spreads like wildfire across every continent. The Amazon River, once the mightiest source of fresh water on the planet, now carries the salinity of seawater. Lake Baikal in Siberia, holding 1/5 of Earth's surface fresh water, has been chemically transformed overnight. The Great Lakes, the Danube, the Nile, the Ganges, every river, every reservoir, every underground aquifer now registers sodium chloride concentrations identical to the ocean. Scientists scramble to their laboratories, running tests that defy logic. The molecular structure has changed at an atomic level, as if some universal switch was flipped. There is no contamination, no gradual seepage, just instant, total conversion. Glaciers in Antarctica, when melted, tasted the sea. Rainwater collected in sterile containers hours earlier now burns the throat with salt. Even bottled water from sealed containers shows the transformation, as though the laws of chemistry themselves have been rewritten. Governments issue emergency broadcasts, but the message is the same everywhere. Do not drink the water. Do not cook with it. Do not bathe in it if you have open wounds. The infrastructure of modern civilization, built entirely on the assumption of fresh water's availability, begins to collapse before noon. 7.8 billion people wake up on a planet where the most fundamental element of survival has become poison. This is not a drought. This is not pollution. This is the end of fresh water. And if what comes next challenges everything humanity has built, then perhaps those who witness it should stay to see how this unprecedented catastrophe unfolds, because the story of Earth's transformation has only just begun. Within hours, the catastrophe reveals its true scale through the machinery of modern life. Water treatment plants across every major city attempt to process the saline influx, but their filtration systems were never designed for this. Reverse osmosis membranes clog immediately. Chemical treatment protocols designed for impurities and bacteria prove useless against dissolved sodium chloride. Plant operators watch helplessly as their equipment fails, one facility after another going offline. By mid-afternoon, urban water supplies worldwide have ceased functioning. Hospitals face immediate crisis. Dialysis machines require purified water. Without it, kidney patients have hours, not days. Surgical theaters postpone operations as sterilization protocols collapse. A hospital in Toronto reports its boiler system corroding at an accelerated rate, the salt concentration eating through pipes designed to last decades. In Singapore, intensive care units begin rationing the bottled water they have on hand, prioritizing critical patients while others wait with cracked lips and rising panic. Fire departments confront an impossible equation. A warehouse fire erupts in Chicago, and when crews connect their hoses to hydrants, they pump seawater onto the flames. The salt reacts with certain chemicals, intensifying the blaze instead of extinguishing it. 3 firefighters suffer severe dehydration from the heat and steam, their bodies already depleted from refusing to drink the contaminated supply. The warehouse burns for 11 hours. Industrial facilities that depend on massive water consumption shut down within the first day. Semiconductor fabrication plants in Taiwan and South Korea cease production. Their ultra-pure water systems now produce brine. Steel mills across Germany close their cooling systems, unable to risk the corrosive damage. Power plants relying on water for cooling face critical decisions, continue operating with salt water and destroy their infrastructure, or shut down and plunge regions into darkness. In homes everywhere, the psychology of thirst takes hold. The human body can survive weeks without food, but only 3 to 4 days without water. People know this instinctively. Supermarkets are overwhelmed within 2 hours of the first reports. Every bottle of water, juice, soda, and liquid beverage stripped from shelves. In Phoenix, police are called to 6 different stores where fights have broken out over the last remaining cases. A man in Jakarta drinks from his car's windshield washer reservoir. A family in Manchester collects condensation from their refrigerator coils. As darkness falls on that first day, cities that once blazed with light begin to dim. Not from power failure, but from the collective realization settling over billions of minds. The water is not coming back. While cities grapple with their immediate crisis, a slower but equally devastating devastating death sentence unfolds across the world's farmlands. The transformation of fresh water strikes at the foundation of agriculture itself, and the timeline for global starvation begins counting down with mechanical precision. In California's Central Valley, which produces 1/3 of America's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts, irrigation systems activate on their programmed schedules. Center pivot sprinklers sweep across fields of lettuce, alfalfa, and tomatoes, delivering not life but poison. Salt water saturates the soil, and within 48 hours, the effects become visible. Lettuce leaves curl and brown at their edges, a condition called leaf burn. Tomato plants wilt as their roots struggle to absorb moisture from the saline-saturated earth. The osmotic balance that allows plants to draw water through their root systems reverses. Instead of hydration, they experience cellular dehydration. The science behind this collapse is brutally simple. When salt concentration in soil exceeds certain thresholds, plants must expend more energy to extract water than they can produce through photosynthesis. For most crops, salinity above 2,000 parts per million proves lethal. The transformed water measures 35,000 parts per million, identical to seawater. Even salt-tolerant crops like barley and sugar beets cannot survive these levels. Rice paddies across Southeast Asia, which feed nearly half the world's population, turn into dead zones within a week. Rice requires flooding during its growing season, and farmers in Thailand, Vietnam, and Bangladesh watch helplessly as their fields transform into brine pools. The young plants yellow, then collapse, their stems unable to support even their own weight. An estimated 2.8 billion people depend on rice as their primary caloric source. That supply chain breaks completely. Wheat fields in Ukraine and Kansas face identical devastation. The winter wheat, already sprouted and growing, begins to die from the roots upward. Corn in Iowa shows necrosis patterns within 5 days. Soybeans in Brazil develop chlorosis as chlorophyll production halts. Every major grain crop worldwide enters terminal decline simultaneously. Livestock operations face compounded catastrophe. Cattle require between 30 and 50 liters of water daily. Pigs need 15 liters. Chickens need water continuously for egg production and survival. Dairy operations across Wisconsin and the Netherlands watch their herds decline rapidly. Cows that drink the salt water develop acute diarrhea, accelerating their dehydration. Within 72 hours, major operations begin mass culling, unable to sustain animals that cannot be given water or processed into meat without functioning slaughterhouses, which themselves require massive water inputs. The mathematics of famine become undeniable. Global food reserves, under optimal conditions, provide approximately 74 days of stored calories for the human population. But without ongoing harvests, without functioning livestock operations, without the ability to process or preserve food, those reserves begin depleting at unprecedented rates. But reserves mean nothing to bodies already shutting down from dehydration. While food supplies dwindle over weeks, the human body's relationship with water operates on a far more urgent timeline. By day 3 of the catastrophe, emergency rooms across the globe transform into triage zones for mass dehydration casualties. The physiology of thirst follows a predictable cascade of system failures. When the body loses just 2% of its water content, cognitive function begins to deteriorate. At 5%, heart rate and respiration increase as blood volume drops, forcing the cardiovascular system into overdrive. At 10% loss, muscle spasm, skin shrivels, and delirium sets in. At 12%, the kidneys cease filtering blood, cellular death accelerates, and circulatory collapse becomes inevitable. In New Delhi, a pediatric ward reports 43 infant deaths in a single night. Children under 5 possess lower body water reserves and higher surface area to volume ratios, making them catastrophically vulnerable. Their small kidneys cannot compensate for even minor dehydration. A 6-month-old infant requires roughly 800 milliliters of fluid daily, roughly 3 bottles. Without it, their systems shut down within 36 hours. Elderly populations face parallel devastation. A nursing home in Montreal loses 18 residents over 4 days. The aging body's thirst mechanism dulls with time, and many don't recognize their own dehydration until it's critical. Their kidneys, already compromised by decades of use, cannot process even small amounts of salt water that desperate individuals attempt to drink. Acute kidney injury becomes the leading cause of death among those over 65. Those who try to drink the salt water accelerate their own demise. Seawater contains 3 times the salt concentration that human kidneys can process. When someone drinks it, their kidneys must use existing water reserves to flush the excess sodium, creating a devastating feedback loop. 1 liter of seawater consumed requires 1.5 liters of fresh water to process. A man in Perth drinks from his kitchen tap in desperation, ignoring the warnings. Within 8 hours, he experiences violent diarrhea, vomiting, and seizures. His kidneys fail completely by morning. Hospitals run through their reserves of intravenous saline within 72 hours. IV bags require sterile water for production, and pharmaceutical plants have no way to manufacture more. Physicians face impossible choices, which patients receive the remaining hydration, and which are left to die. In Sao Paulo, doctors establish protocols prioritizing young adults with the highest survival probability. A mother watches her diabetic son move to the comfort care section, his name removed from the treatment list. The death toll climbs exponentially. Nations with robust infrastructure report losses in the hundreds of thousands within the first week. In regions with limited medical access, entire villages go silent. The catastrophe doesn't discriminate, it simply follows the biology of thirst to its conclusion. As bodies fail by the millions, governments pivot from crisis management to desperate engineering. The only technology capable of producing potable water from the salinized planet is desalination, and the world's existing capacity can serve barely 2% of the global population. Prior to the catastrophe, roughly 20,000 desalination plants operated worldwide, concentrated in water-scarce regions like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel. These facilities produce approximately 95 million cubic meters of fresh water daily. Humanity, however, requires roughly 11 billion cubic meters per day for drinking, sanitation, and basic survival. The gap is not a shortage, it's an abyss. The largest plant on Earth, Ras Al Khair in Saudi Arabia, can desalinate 1 million cubic meters daily. It serves roughly 4 million people. To meet global demand using current technology would require 11,000 identical facilities. Construction time for a single large-scale plant, 4 to 6 years. The timeline is impossible. Engineers and scientists convene emergency sessions, searching for rapid deployment solutions. Mobile desalination units, typically used by military operations and disaster relief, become the immediate focus. These trailer-mounted systems can produce 5,000 to 50,000 liters per day, enough for a few hundred people at most. The United States military redirects every available unit to major population centers. It's a symbolic gesture. 300 units serving a nation of 330 million people. The energy requirements present an equally devastating obstacle. Desalination through reverse osmosis, the most efficient method, consumes roughly 4 kilowatt hours per cubic meter of water produced. Thermal desalination methods, which boil water and capture the steam, require even more, up to 15 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. To desalinate enough water for global survival would demand more electricity than the world's entire current generating capacity. Power grids already strained by the crisis cannot possibly scale to meet this need. Israel, which derives 60% of its water from desalination, becomes the focus of desperate international attention. The Sorek plant, a technological marvel that produces 627,000 cubic meters daily, operates at maximum capacity with armed guards at every entrance. Within 5 days, the Israeli government faces pressure from the European Union, the United States, and neighboring nations to share both water and expertise. Diplomatic negotiations occur in rooms where representatives haven't slept in 72 hours, their own dehydration evident in trembling hands and sunken eyes. China announces a state-directed mobilization, converting coastal industrial facilities into makeshift desalination operations. Chemical plants, refineries, and manufacturing complexes receive orders to repurpose their distillation equipment. The effort produces water, but at catastrophic purity levels heavy metals, chemical residues, and industrial contaminants make much of it nearly as dangerous as the salt water itself. The reality settles over scientific communities like a shroud. There is no scaling solution. Desalination cannot save 8 billion people. It can only choose who survives. When technology cannot expand to meet humanity's needs, humanity itself moves. The choice is not conscious or coordinated. It emerges from the simple calculus of survival. If water exists only where desalination plants operate, then people will go to the desalination plants. Within 10 days of the catastrophe, the largest human migration in history begins. Landlocked regions empty first. In Chad, Mali, and Niger, entire towns dismantle as families load what they can carry onto vehicles, carts, and their own backs, moving toward any coast with ocean access. The roads become rivers of humanity flowing in one direction. Bolivia, with no coastal infrastructure, experiences near total evacuation within 2 weeks. 11 million people attempt to reach Chile or Peru. The highways from La Paz to the Pacific become clogged with abandoned vehicles. People walk the remaining distance 200 to 400 kilometers through the Andes, where high high-altitude dehydration kills thousands. Central Asia faces geographic catastrophe. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Afghanistan, collectively home to 100 million people, sit thousands of kilometers from the nearest ocean. Those who can afford it flee by air. The rest begin walking. Satellite imagery captures the movement. Dark trails of human masses converging on distant coastlines like blood flowing toward a wound. Coastal cities watch the approaching multitudes with growing alarm. Los Angeles sees its population swell from 4 million to 12 million within 3 weeks. Makeshift encampments sprawl across every park and vacant space. Barcelona's population triples. Mumbai, Jakarta, Lagos, every coastal metropolis becomes a pressure vessel of human desperation. Governments establish water zones, militarized perimeters around desalination facilities where access is controlled through rationing systems. In Sydney, citizens receive identification wristbands linked to biometric databases. Each person is allocated 2 liters per day, distributed at checkpoints under armed guard. The queue at Kurnell desalination plant stretches for 8 kilometers. People wait 14 hours for their ration. Refugee camps form along coastlines, settlements that grow into cities within days. Outside Cape Town, 2 million people establish a sprawling encampment visible from orbit. 8 organizations attempt to maintain order, but the scale overwhelms every system. Cholera spreads rapidly through the densely packed populations. The geography of power undergoes fundamental transformation. Coastlines become the only valuable territory. Interior lands hold no worth. Real estate markets collapse everywhere except within 50 kilometers of the ocean. The world map redraws itself not through conquest, but through the simple physics of where water can be made. Where resources become scarce enough, civilization's veneer cracks, and violence fills the void. Water, once freely available from any tap, becomes the most valuable commodity on Earth, and like all valuable commodities throughout history, it becomes worth killing for. The first armed conflict erupts at a desalination plant in Karachi, Pakistan. Military forces assigned to protect the facility find themselves outnumbered by thousands of desperate civilians attempting to breach the perimeter. When warning shots fail to disperse the crowd, commanders face an impossible choice. The shooting lasts 11 minutes. 374 people die for access to water they believed was their right to survive. Similar confrontations spread globally within days. In Jeddah, Saudi Arabian forces fire on refugees from Yemen. In Lima, Peruvian security clashes with Bolivian migrants. The violence is purely biological. One group has access to water, another will die without it. National borders become literal lines between life and death. Egypt closes its frontiers with Libya and Sudan, deploying military forces along the entire border. Crossings become killing zones. Satellite imagery captures mass graves being excavated, too many bodies to process individually. Naval conflicts emerge over floating desalination barges. Turkey deploys converted oil tankers equipped with desalination units into the Mediterranean. When one drifts into Greek waters, both nations scramble naval vessels. The standoff ends only after Turkish jets force Greek withdrawal. Watching these events unfold from wherever you are right now, how would your own nation respond when survival means limiting who receives water? The global order fractures along new lines. Coastal nations form alliances based purely on desalination capacity. Chile closes its borders entirely, declaring martial law. Japan negotiates exclusive agreements with South Korea and Taiwan, pooling technological expertise while preventing refugee influx from mainland Asia. Landlocked nations face extinction-level decisions. Hungary negotiates with Croatia for guaranteed water access in exchange for total economic submission, essentially voluntary annexation. Croatia accepts, recognizing their coastline has become a weapon more powerful than any military arsenal. Bottled water reserves become currency. In Denver, authorities discover a warehouse containing 80,000 liters of pre-crisis water. The owner is killed during the raid by his own security team. Black markets emerge where a single liter trades for gold or vehicles. A case of water in Mexico City costs $12,000. The world has not just changed, it has weaponized thirst itself. While humanity wages war over its own survival, a parallel extinction unfolds in silence. The ecosystems that once sustained planetary biodiversity collapse without gunfire, without negotiations, without mercy. Nature follows the same brutal chemistry that has claimed billions of human lives. The Amazon rainforest begins dying within 3 weeks. Trees that have stood for centuries cannot adapt to salinized groundwater. Their root systems, evolved over millennia to draw fresh water from soil, now pull brine that kills cells from the inside. Leaves yellow, then brown, then fall in cascades that carpet the forest floor. Within 6 weeks, satellite imagery shows vast stretches of brown where green once dominated. The decomposition releases stored carbon at catastrophic rates, accelerating atmospheric changes that compound the crisis. Freshwater fish species face complete extinction within days. Rivers, lakes, and streams worldwide once hosted roughly 15,000 species adapted specifically to low salinity environments. When their habitats transform to seawater composition, their cellular structures cannot compensate. Trout in Norwegian streams, catfish in the Mississippi, tilapia in Lake Victoria all die within 48 hours. The Amazon River alone loses over 3,000 endemic species in a single week. Terrestrial animals dependent on drinking water follow shortly after. Elephants in African savannas, which require up to 200 liters daily, die beside salinized watering holes. Their carcasses attract scavengers who themselves succumb after consuming the dehydrated flesh. Lions, hyenas, and vultures fall into a cascade of secondary extinction. Bird migrations cease mid-flight. Species that navigate thousands of kilometers rely on freshwater stops for survival. When every wetland becomes saltwater, migratory routes become death sentences. Cranes, geese, and songbirds fall from the sky over landscapes that no longer offer refuge. The knowledge of what's happening deserves to reach others. If ever there were a moment to share an understanding of what a world without its ecosystems truly means, it would be now. Forests across temperate zones experience synchronized death. Oak, maple, and birch that have defined landscapes for thousands of years turn skeletal within months. The planet is not just losing its human population, it's losing the biological framework that made Earth livable. Years pass, measured not in seasons but in the rhythm of desalination cycles and ration distributions. The initial die-off claims an estimated 4.2 billion people, more than half of humanity. Those who remain have been forged into something different, a civilization rebuilt along the narrow margins where ocean meets land. Coastal cities evolve into the only permanent human settlements. Architecture transforms to accommodate perpetual water scarcity. Buildings incorporate rooftop condensation collectors that harvest moisture from sea air. Every structure connects to central desalination networks through protected pipelines that run like arteries beneath the streets. Housing is allocated not by wealth, but by proximity to water infrastructure. The closer to the plant, the higher the survival priority. Diet undergoes radical transformation. Agriculture as it once existed has vanished entirely. Humanity becomes dependent on the ocean for sustenance. Kelp farms stretch for kilometers along coastlines, cultivated in vast underwater plantations. Fish farming intensifies to industrial scales, with species genetically selected for salt tolerance and rapid growth. Seaweed, once a niche food, becomes the staple crop rich in nutrients, fast-growing and thriving in the now universal salt water. Children born after the catastrophe know no other food. The taste of an apple exists only in stories their grandparents tell. Cultural memory shifts within a single generation. Elders speak of rivers, of rain that could be drunk, of green landscapes stretching beyond sight. To the young, these tales sound mythological, impossible stories from a world that never truly existed. Museums preserve bottles of pre-catastrophe fresh water like sacred relics. Children press their faces to the glass, trying to comprehend a liquid indistinguishable from what kills them. Social structures reorganize around collective survival. Individualism, once celebrated in many cultures, becomes untenable. Communities function through rigid water-sharing protocols. Hoarding is punishable by exile, a death sentence in a world where leaving the coast means entering uninhabitable wastelands. Identity itself shifts. People no longer identify by nationality or ethnicity, but by their desalination zone, Zone 7, Zone 12, Sector 4B. The concept of waste disappears. Every drop of water after human use is recycled through biological filtration systems. Gray water is purified and returned to the cycle. Nothing is discarded. Humanity has learned, through necessity, to live within the closed loop that spaceflight engineers once designed for hypothetical colonies. Decades after the transformation, scientists still search for answers to the question that haunts every survivor. Can it be reversed? Research facilities in Japan and Norway dedicate their limited resources to understanding the molecular change that occurred. Teams analyze water samples preserved from before the catastrophe, comparing their atomic structure to current samples. The findings offer no comfort. The transformation appears to have been complete at the quantum level. Hydrogen and oxygen molecules remain bonded as water, but sodium and chloride ions have become permanently integrated into the solution at concentrations that defy natural dilution. Theoretical physicists propose scenarios involving massive energy expenditure, planetary scale distillation that would require harnessing more power than human civilization has ever generated. The most optimistic models suggest that reversing the salinization of Earth's water would demand energy equivalent to 10,000 years of pre-catastrophe global consumption delivered instantaneously. The technology doesn't doesn't exist. The resources to build it don't exist. Even the population capable of attempting it has been reduced beyond the threshold of such ambition. Some propose adaptation instead of reversal. Genetic engineering programs attempt to modify human physiology to tolerate higher salinity levels. Initial trials on human subjects show catastrophic organ failure. The kidney, evolved over millions of years to filter specific concentrations, cannot be redesigned in a single generation. Perhaps in 10,000 years of evolutionary pressure, humanity's descendants might adapt. Perhaps not. The younger generation, those who have known only this coastal existence, no longer dream of restoration. They build vertical farms that grow salt-resistant crops genetically modified in laboratory environments. They construct floating cities that drift across the oceans, following currents rich with the marine life they depend on. They are not survivors waiting for the old world to return. They are pioneers of a new one. Cultural historians document this shift in consciousness. The catastrophe has become mythology, the old world a Garden of Eden from which humanity was expelled. Religious movements emerge around the transformation, some viewing it as divine punishment, others as a test of adaptive will. Philosophy itself changes, but the old questions about purpose and meaning are replaced by immediate calculations of survival and efficiency. In this transformed world, where even knowledge must adapt to serve those who remain, those seeking to understand what humanity lost and what it became would do well to preserve this record. Join those who document these transformations, who maintain the archive of what was and what could be. The horizon stretches endlessly across salt water that covers 71% of the planet's surface. Humanity clings to the remaining 29%, a species that once believed itself the master of nature, now reduced to its mercy. The catastrophe revealed a fundamental truth. Civilization was always only as resilient as its most basic resource, and when that resource vanished, everything else followed.